welcome to Real Wood Matters, a Real Wood podcast where we discuss the ins and outs of the forest products industry, from forest management to furniture trends. On this episode, we have Hank Stelzer, Associate Professor for the University of Missouri State Extension and Education Director of the Mizzou School of Natural Resources. He's ready to share his expertise on carbon. Let's dive right in. Hank, did I miss any of your titles? You have so many of them.
Well, I didn't know if I'd have all those titles. I did figure I was going to be somewhere outdoors. I really didn't know if it was trees as much, but that was probably because, my involvement as a youth in Bull Scouts. And also I had a ninth grade history teacher that had a conservation club in our junior high. And so we went and did float trips throughout the Ozarks in the spring and fall, and in wintertime, we'd go caving. So I guess I was always in the outdoors and enjoyed it.
And where did you grow up? Where were you doing all of that?
I grew up in the suburb there in St. Louis called Overland, so south of the airport, suburban north. I was a Rittner Husky.
And where did your parents spend all of their time when you were growing up? Were they also outdoors with you doing these float trips?
No, they really weren't. Dad was a heavy construction worker, did a lot of projects around the St. Louis metro area, the flood wall along Hall Street, worked on Busch Stadium, the water treatment plants out in the county. Mom was a stay-at-home mom for the most part, although at this time of the year she worked for a small mom and pop income tax company.
Oh, okay. So she definitely had a busy time of year and an off time of year, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. Dad his time was always on, it seemed like. And then when he wasn't working at the day job, if you will, he's carpenter. I mean, that's what he did. When I say heavy construction, he was a carpenter that set forms for all the big operations and whatnot. So he did a lot of cabinetry work and things like that at home. So he was pretty much busy. I mean, he had time for me, but they both had their own thing going on.
Between being outdoors all the time and your dad being in carpentry, you really had a back door into the wood products industry, didn't you?
Yeah, I really wanted to be a carpenter, if truth be told. But he said, no, that's pretty hand to mouth, and said, no, didn't want to do that. And so I really didn't know that much about forest products. But so I said, well, if you can't work with the wood, I'll grow the wood. But if I had to, hindsight, 2020, after all my career in forestry, I could have easily found a home on the forest product side of things.
And so how does your role at Mizzou Extension compare to all of those roles? Tell me about what you do there.
Compared to what all roles? I've had a checkered career, if you will. Not checkered. It's just been. You look at my resume, and you folks would say I couldn't hold a job, but a lot of it was a result of corporate buyouts and downsizings. But I've been blessed to always had a job in forest management and research. So, graduated from Mizzou, stayed on, did my master's here, then worked for a few years between that and my terminal degree over at Purdue, worked for a small company down in Arkansas, came back to Missouri, worked for the Department of Conservation. Probably would have stayed there, but I was really had the bug, I guess, to go back and get the terminal degree. Then after that, went down to Florida and did a postdoctoral fellow. Met my wife there, and then jumped back into corporate America. Worked for Procter & Gamble. They had a subsidiary. They closed their division, and then I went to work for the Forest Service in the Southern Research Station, so on the research side of the Forest Service. They were going to move us to Gulfport, Mississippi, and my wife said no. So we jumped back into corporate world, and I went to work for Champion International at the time. We were taken over by International Paper, and let's just say we had a different philosophies. And then the position here at the University of Missouri came open, and I guess that was about 2002. So came back, and if you would have told me at the start of that odyssey that I'd be back at the University of Missouri doing anything forestry related, I wouldn't have put any money on that bet. But it's been a great now 21 years. So, or 21, 23 years, I guess it is now. So it's been a good ride.
And tell me what you've been doing on this ride. How do you operate day to day? I mean, in the last 21 years, what are all the things you've done?
Well, extension is you go where the leads take you. I mean, so I work with rural landowners throughout the state. So we're more education. So we'll do webinars. Nowadays we'll do webinars, but we'll do workshops and field days. Not so much individual landowner visits, but where we group folks together, try to get landowners interested in doing anything with their property. We've got here in Missouri, we've got about 12.5 million acres that are privately owned. That's about 84% of all the forest cover in the state. And of that, about 350,000 plus landowners across that 12.5 million acres. So, but yet 1 out of 10 of those folks do any kind of management. So the other 90%, that's what we're trying to get folks doing something with their property, because if they don't, Mother Nature will do things for them, and it might not be what their objectives or what their vision was for their land. So I do that quite a bit. Do professional development for our foresters in the state, whether they work for the Department of Conservation or the Forest Service. So we kind of make sure we can bring them up to date on the latest happenings, if you will. And then I've got another small segment that I do work in the urban areas, work with there in St. Louis with Forest Relief of Missouri. So a little bit on the urban forestry side. So it's a catch-22, but never leaves for a dull moment.
Absolutely not. It sounds like you have so much impact on the industry as a whole.
Bless you. It's not, no, I don't have that. No, I don't have that much of an impact, really. I mean, we'll take it. We all work together. On a good day, there might be 200, what we call professional foresters in the state. A lot of them work for the Department of Conservation. We've got, about 50 or so that are consulting foresters. So it takes that small village to kind of reach out. So we work quite closely together.
And how would you say those partnerships, the industry as a whole, how would you say all that impacts your life?
Come again? Give me that one again.
Yeah, I just wonder, you spent all this time out in the woods when you were a kid and you were around your dad who was a carpenter, and now you're having an impact on the industry, in my opinion. And how does the industry, the woods products industry in particular, the forestry industry, how does that impact your life?
I'd say it's impacted quite a bit in the last 5 or 6 years. We had a summit back, we being the leadership in the college, teach the operators how to realign their saws and get maximum, efficiency. But when I came back to the university, there wasn't. All those folks retired, and they really didn't fill those positions. So we kind of just grew apart from the forest products folks. Then we decided that the new leadership within the college, so we need to try to re-engage. And so we had this, if you will, summit at the winter meeting back in, I guess it was 18. And that's where it started, really. Brad Boswell with Independent Stave, he reached out, was curious. They were big supporters in other aspects of the university, but he didn't know how much forest products we did or anything like that, which we didn't. But that started a conversation. And then one thing led to another. And that's what, it's in these last few years, we put together what we call the Mizzou Sustainable Forestry Initiative, where they put up a large chunk of money, but then I was able to get small matches, medium-sized matches from others in the forest products industry, and also our major source distillers that are here in the state, to where we're able to put together to expand our extension program and actually hire an individual. He retired from the Department of Conservation, 30 years experience with landowner engagement, really good. Glad to have Brian on board. But and it's just kind of grown organically from that. we started, showing results. And then Brian came to us when the Choose Wood campaign took root, to get involved a little bit. And that's where that carbon report came about. And so we've just been able to grow it organically, produce, show we can have a positive impact. It might be small, but it's been one where the companies around the state, they're beginning to see that some added value we have. And again, that in turn is given the money that we've received from them, the support to kind of grow up to that point in time. It's just been me as a state forestry specialist and Bob Pierce as the wildlife specialist. But like I say, since then, we've grown to where we've got 3 field specialists working in the field. And that's enabled us to really start making an impact, plus with Brian's position here.
Absolutely. And you mentioned this carbon report. I'd love to talk more about that. The report has a very scientific title. It's Carbon and Biomass Dynamics in Missouri Forests and Implications for Climate Change. I don't want to dumb it down, but no. I've got blonde roots, so we might have to dumb it down.
No, I'll leave that to my colleagues. I mean, I didn't have a say in the title, but yeah, it is a mouthful. But it does capture things. So where this came about was Brian came to us shortly after he got the first grant from the Department of Economic Development that the Choose Wood campaign, as you well know, how you're deeply involved, your firm's deeply involved. But Brian wanted to have, if you will, a scientific base to kind of be push off of. So, and there really wasn't any one definitive product out there, much less something that had a Missouri base, if you will. So he asked me, and then I've got a few of my colleagues together, and he came up and visited, and we said, well, what can we do? And said, well, we're going to have to pull in some people from outside. We don't have the horsepower necessarily to do it, but there was a retired individual. No, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. That's how things evolve, right? Yeah. So we knew that material and information was out there supporting, explaining the carbon cycle in fairly simple terms. But then as we started getting into how is carbon pulled from the atmosphere, and then what happens to it when it gets caught up in a tree or a plant. And then we wanted to talk about the positive effects that placing, harvesting trees, placing that in a long-term wood product, like a 2x4 or wood flooring or whatever it might be, kind of banks that carbon that's been captured. Kind of think weakest link. You're kind of moving along and we bank that carbon. We tie that up, and then the trees that are out there, they can capture more carbon because we've thinned the forest. We weeded the garden. They're able to capture more carbon. So over the life of that forest, they're actually, capturing more than if we didn't do anything. And again, let Mother Nature just take her course. And when those trees die, they're not then put into a wood product. And so where does that carbon go? It gets broken down and gets released in the atmosphere. So it's really not helping any. So there were lots of reports out there, lots of findings, lots of, if you will, pieces everywhere. So we were more just curating the information that's out there and packaging it and putting it, not to dumb things down or anything, but we try to shoot for all of our extension. Anything we do reaching the general public, you've got them all over the range. So we shoot for that, if you will, 6th, 8th grade level. Mm-hmm. And again, trying to make graphics simple and catching to understand, because you're right. This report kind of goes into it, and it is about carbon and biomass dynamics. Things aren't static. Mm-hmm. And we wanted to bring it into Missouri's forests. The implications for climate change, as far as just capturing, able to take carbon that we're putting out to capture some small piece of it. It's not a panacea. I mean, our forest products, our forests, we're going to have to do other things to get rid of the carbon that we're putting in, but forests are one way that we can have an active role.
Amazing. Amazing. I do want to plug and mention each of your co-authors on this report. We've got Stephen R. Shifley, which
Shifley.
Shifley.
So Steve Shifley, Abby Hoffman, and Ben Knapp. And I should probably be the asterisk, because I got in, well, I kind of started the ball rolling, and then Steve was the one that I identified. He had retired from the Forest Service after God knows how many years, decades, but he was involved with a lot of these regional assessments and on any aspect of forestry, if you will, forest management. So I knew he was a good resource, and he has a way of able to pull things together in layman's terms, even though he was a research scientist. Abby, so Ben came in, he's on the faculty here at the University of Missouri. He is our silviculturalist. I know we'll talk about that word in a minute, but he, and then Abby was his grad student, kind of post-grad student. So Abby became Abby Hoffman. She was the yeoman. Steve would kind of lay out the game plan, and they would meet almost weekly, the three of them. Ben just keeping up with Abby, but then Abby would go out and grab information, and then Steve would he would basically sit at his home in his retirement home there, and not retirement home, you know what I mean, his home away from home, and pull things together. Ben would put his input. I got into it at the end just because, again, looking at it as an extension educator. And I graciously, or not graciously, I said, "Hey, would you guys include me on the title for putting it out?" But I was involved in the final edits and things, and kind of pulling things together. But it was the three of those were the bulk that generated the report.
Amazing. And you mentioned silviculture. For those of us who don't know, can you give us a definition? What is silviculture?
Very simple. It's the art of growing trees. They say it's the art and science of growing trees. So, we professional forestry, you go to college to learn the science and all the pieces, but when you're out on the landscape, depending upon where you're at, the landscape, the canvas is always changing. So that's not a cookie cutter prescription. What works in Dent County, Missouri won't work in Shelby County, Missouri. I mean, it's just, Missouri is so diverse as far as geography and soils and where plants grow. I mean, that it really is, you have to have your boots on the ground, see what the local scenario is, and then adapt your tools from your toolbox to paint on that landscape.
Amazing. I want to switch gears just a little bit. I talked with MFPA Executive Director Brian Brookshire, you've mentioned him already, about the report when I hosted him here on the podcast. I want to get your take now on all of the different sources that Abby and the rest of them and yourself at the very end pulled together. I mean, we've got the EPA, we've got NASA, Panel on Climate Change, Department of Agriculture, Forest Service. Tell me about all of these different sources and I guess the bottom line of what they say about forestry.
Well, that's a tall order, really. I mean, when you look at it on the Forest Service side, there's a division called Forest Inventory and Analysis. So that's where a lot of the information is pulled together. These are systematic surveys that are done throughout the United States, in Missouri here, and they're done systematically so that every year a certain number of plots, permanent plots that are out there, and they go out and measure them, and on landowners, private land, but they have permission. They don't reveal. I don't even know where those are, but there's, like in Missouri alone, there's about 6,000 of those plots that are out there. So, and imagine they're sampling over time. So they've got mountains of data. And that's where a lot of it, we can see how trees are growing, how much carbon is tied up in the wood that's where the carbon goes, is in our above ground and our below ground. But they have their researchers, the biometricians, as we call them, or the biomagicians. They actually take all those measurements, and they know how much carbon is in everything from the leaves to the roots. So you have a lot of that changes over time. And then so that's where the Forest Service kind of comes into a lot of this. But other folks like NOAA and the folks, the spatial data that's gathered from satellites, the imagery. So then you can take that and marry that with the data that's on the ground. And so you can start getting lots of information that, 40, 50 years ago, we didn't have access to like we do today. So it's just pulling all that information together.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that the team met once a week for quite a while. How long did that process take to pull together all of these findings?
Well, that was interesting. Brian came to us in September 2 years ago and said, I need this report by the end of June.
Wow.
Yeah, so he gave us under a year to do that. And we told him that's going to be a stretch. And we went right up to the end of June. Matter of fact, the report was hot off the press in the July summer meeting a year ago at the MFPA meeting, or 2 years ago now that we're in 25. So I always say we, I don't have a mouse in my pocket. Steve was under the gun, to kind of pull it together. But like I say, I don't know of anybody else in the country that could have done that if it wasn't for Steve. And so we were all pleased with the final product.
Here in Missouri, trees really are our number one natural resource.
Most of the forests in Missouri are naturally regenerated.
The forest industry is a viable industry. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be here for a long time.
We have a stronger, healthier forest than we've had in over 100 years.
Can you tell me a little bit more about one of the key findings in particular, that a well-managed forest pulls carbon from the atmosphere at a higher rate than a forest just left alone? I know we touched on it, but I'd love to get a little bit more on it.
Yeah. So really, if you think about a woodland, like an unweeded garden, that's what I kind of put when I talk to landowners, and they don't. I mean, usually folks look at their woods and they say, if it's green, it's good. And that's about all they think about. But foresters operate on a landscape scale, not square feet in a garden, but acres, hundreds, thousands of acres, and not in weeks or months of a growing season, but decades of a time a tree grows. So, but it's the same processes happen, just on a slower scale. So I ask folks, what happens if you have this garden and you planted too many seeds, or you walk away and you go on vacation and you don't water it? What happens? And so from having too many plants in that garden or too many trees on the landscape, then the resources, the sunlight, the water gets distributed over too many individuals. And so you don't get the tomatoes, you don't get the large trees that can generate our wood products. Then you also get unhealthy trees, unhealthy plants, that'll be more susceptible to, say, drought or an insect or disease situation. So by thinning the forest, by removing the weak trees, maybe depending upon the objectives of the landowner, the undesirable trees. Not everybody wants the same species of tree, so they'll do that. That they'll weed the garden. They'll take out the weak ones, they'll take out the undesirables. But then what that does is those remaining trees on the landscape, they have more room. And when they have more room, they sequester, they tie up, capture atmospheric carbon at a faster rate. So maybe early on in the life of that forest, the trees that we remove are too small to go into, say, flooring or something. But they can be chipped and supplied to everything from landscape mulches to paper products into pulp and paper. We have a paper mill down in Kentucky that takes a lot of material from Missouri. But then as those trees grow, as that forest grows larger or grows in time, and those trees we left behind get bigger, then we can start doing what they would call a commercial sale. Those products then can go into flooring, can go into grade lumber, the kinds that goes into, window casings and door casings and cabinetry, railroad ties, things of that nature, to where then we get to the final stage of the forest when we regenerate. When those trees, most of our trees are oak and hickories, they will will be anywhere from 90 years. Our red oaks to our white oaks might be 200 years. But at any one point in time, it's time to regenerate the forest, and we start that cycle over. But throughout the course of the development of that forest, then as we take those trees and can put them into a commercial product, that's where we're saying we're banking that carbon that has been captured, the long-term capture of that sequestered carbon. Sequestering means, the active removal. So when you look at a graph, the one that's in our book, it's kind of points that out. It shows over time how much carbon is actually captured by that forest, and we've maintained its health and we've maintained its resiliency. Whatever side you fall on climate change, we know climate is changing. We know trees are moving, if you will. We've got trees. When I worked in Arkansas, a particular pine that we couldn't plant north of the Arkansas River. Now I can plant that same species and it do quite well in southern Missouri. So that's a span of about 100 plus miles in 45 years of my life. So it's something that I've seen. But again, by thinning the forest, you're making it healthy, you're making it stronger, and so we're having your cake and eat it too, basically what it means. You haven't asked me about what's all this stuff behind me. For all this time we've talked, and I'm embarrassed. I've tried to, when we first started talking, I said, hey, where's my virtual background, my cool virtual background? You did, oh no, this looks good. Yeah, well, I guess that does kind of, you're looking at the clean half.
Oh, no.
If you see, if you see the other half, they gave me the large office because, no, I'm not that great of a professor. I just extension. So I have lots of material that kind of goes out to landowners. Okay. So it's like a warehouse. Things are moving in and moving out all the time. I just had to say that. No,
I am very interested in one of the signs behind you, managed forests. And then I can't read the second line underneath.
Turn around. Let's see. That was a campaign. So managed forest means wood products. And there's another one there. Managed forest means green space. When I worked in Florida, that was a campaign that the Florida Society of American Foresters had. And so I had another one that I don't know. Somebody must have liked it because it was on the back of my pickup, my university pickup. And it said managed forest means jobs. That was the one I liked the most because it wasn't only, it's jobs for the loggers, the logging community. It's jobs for the sawmills, the 400 plus that we have here in the state. It's jobs for the foresters and for the folks that are going to go out and do those, what we call those tending treatments. And if we don't do that, if we just, the forest, like we said, it's green, it's good, but we're getting lots of invasive things now happening in the forest. And it's going to come up in about a month here, 2 months. About the time the forsythias are coming out, it's Easter. I will get calls from landowners literally now almost all over the state saying, my trees are dead. What's going on? That's because they're seeing not only the forsythias, but they're seeing the bush honeysuckle. So you can go anywhere. I challenge anyone that listens to this podcast, you go out about that time and you see all this green, lush growth that might be, hopefully it's less than head high, but it's getting more than that now. And so those are the invasive species, particularly bush honeysuckle, but autumn olive. They're the first things to green up and then flip it on the other side of the growing season. After we have our fall frosts and the leaves fall from the trees, you see the still green growth. Mm-hmm. And so what that's doing, it's robbing sunlight. It's so the trees above it are okay, but then everything below it, our oaks, our hickories, anything, they're getting shaded out. not only those, but our natural forbs, herbaceous stuff that's in the forest floor, all that's going out. So you look underneath that layer and it's just like a friggin' desert. And so we've got to get rid of it. But that is our teachable moment that, again, landowners they don't think of their woods. But when they see that, 5 years ago, they saw maybe one or two of these green things that are out there. But over time, now it's just taken over the forest where they see that change. That's our teachable moment to say, hey, your woods aren't static, they're dynamic. And then we can kind of get in and talk. So my colleagues cringe when I say bush honeysuckles is a good thing, because it's giving us that teachable moment to maybe raise, a landowner's awareness to things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does that then open the door for you and any foresters to help private landowners manage and maintain those forests and make them healthier?
Hopefully. I mean, that's what we do. We try to do through our workshops. We try to raise the level of awareness, and then we have a clearinghouse through the Forest and Woodland Association of Missouri. That's just the nonprofit group that's out there. They can refer them to a consulting forester for an initial visit to kind of assess. But we can raise the awareness, and then the other challenge, though, is unless you're independently wealthy, it costs to do this kind of work, and maybe not all woodlands are old enough to harvest and to do some of these commercial thinnings, if you will. But a lot of times there are, and that's what it takes. That's not only is it a good thing that it's wood products going in and sequestering carbon and supporting the forest products industry and all the allied industries that rely upon that for our health of our rural communities. But it's giving some revenue to that landowner that didn't have it before, that we try to get them to reinvest back into the forest, so they can pay for that forest thinning that might, in another part of their woodland that it's going to cost, but they have now money from a revenue from a timber sale, and maybe another part of their woodland to take care of that. So that's what we say. That's where the art comes in. We've got all the science pieces, but then it takes not us extension foresters, but all of the foresters kind of realizing they're just artists, really, when it comes to it.
Then it sounds to me almost like you all have to work with private landowners. So then is there a challenge in when, say, a parent that has previously owned these forests dies? Is there a challenge to get families to keep that forest in the family?
It can be. That's another thing that really I'm spending a lot of time right now working with. Is we've had some workshops last winter rather. I was invited over to Illinois last fall, and I'm actually headed up to a tri-state conference up in Dubuque. Same thing, talking about keeping your forest, keeping your farm in the families. And it really comes down to communication. A lot of folks don't think about, it kind of an adage could be tomorrow, or today is the tomorrow that you didn't think about yesterday. Is kind of like how I like to put it to folks, and because they don't think about it until something happens to mom or dad, and a lot of times, if they thought about it, they just go, "Well, I've got 4 kids. I will divide the land equally," And that's probably the worst thing you can do, is do that, because usually, and the stories we've heard over the years, one of those kids didn't have an interest at all. They want their share of the money. And so that usually forces the other 3 siblings, again, unless they're independently wealthy, they've got to come up with that money, which means they either force the sale, is division of the property and sale, or they will just do a whole harvest and what we call high grade, just take everything of value, and then there's nothing left behind. So we try to get mom and dad to sit down and make sure they're on the same page, and that's not necessarily always the same, and then conveying that to their heirs, whoever those heirs might be. They might be the kids, they might be the cousins. That's where we kind of go back and saying the best fertilizer for the ground is footprints, where you can actually then, where people, you get tied to the land. You know, somebody in that group will have that same desire, that same passion. And so the child or the heir that wants the money will give them the Ferrari or the stock option or something, but where then you can kind of work and divide the equity equally, but maybe not the land. So that's becoming a challenge. A lot of the boomers that have the land now, they hung on to it, 2008 when the recession, they hung on to it for the pandemic, or they hung on to their jobs and whatnot. Now that they're retiring and or passing, there's not a plan in place. So we're on the cusp of seeing a huge land ownership change in not only Missouri, but across, I'd say, the eastern United States.
And is that something that the School of Natural Resources and you are preparing for? And if so, how are you preparing for it?
Ooh, we do the best we can. You'll find I'm full of quotes. I like Theodore Roosevelt. You do what you can with what you have where you're at. So we can't save every landowner. We can't reach every landowner, whether it's some legacy planning or forest management. It's one landowner, one parcel. Hopefully it's bigger than an acre, but we want, just one step at a time. And we can't worry about the things we can't touch, but we do the best we can with what we've got. That's what we're trying to do now with the program we're developing. We're calling it a woodland mentor program. And that's where we've got landowners out throughout the state that are doing work at every level, and trying to reach out to those folks, just give them, if you will, kind of like, I won't call it nurse practitioner, forest practitioner, some basic skills, basic first aid, basic ideas of the things they've been doing on their woodlands, but then reaching over the fence to their neighbors or in that area and have little cohorts built up. And they can vary. I mean, not every one thing we really hadn't touched upon. Why do forest landowners own their property? It's not for wood products.
Oh.
It's wood products goes about number 15 on the scale. The top ones are privacy, legacy, wildlife,
Really?
recreation, and not necessarily even hunting. Hunting is up there, but it's just having that. So these landowner groups, one landowner group might be into neotropical songbirds, and another group might be deer and turkey. Another one might be ruffed grouse. And so you can get into forestry through the back door, if you will. You've got their interest. You're managing the habitat, and the habitat is that main canopy of the forest. What are you doing? You're harvesting. You're doing some harvesting. Isn't all bad. And so you're doing things to promote those other objectives of your property. And guess what? When you do that, those trees grow. They have larger canopies for the acorns, for the deer and the turkey and birds and everything else. But now you're putting that's carbon that's being pulled out of the atmosphere is going not only into those, but it's going into that trunk of that tree, that wood product. So that's where we say it's a tapestry. What you pull on one thread, you're going to pull on the others. And that same thing goes for the interest of a landowner. We don't try to tell a landowner what to do. Mm-mm. That's the other piece. I think my generation, or I know folks when I was being taught, it was the foresters. We know what to do, and we're going to prescribe and do things. We've learned over the years now that no, the first one is we don't own that land. It's that husband or wife, and they have objectives. And what we try to do is survey the forest, and maybe some of the objectives they want to do, their woodlands won't yield. Example might be landowner wants to grow walnut trees, loves walnut trees, wants to grow trees. Walnut is very finicky. It needs a particular type of soil in a particular place on the landscape. And so if that landowner doesn't have woodlands that are meeting those specs, then you go back to the landowner and say, well, you want to do this, but your land is telling you something else. And so this is what you can do. And maybe you need to alter your vision, or what can we do to kind of get, find some kind of compromise once we get through that minimum hurdle, if you will. And so that's where the forester then works with that landowner, trying to meet their overall vision, but then also what resources they have to realize that vision. Lots of words. You'll find out. I have so many words.
Oh, Hank, I already know. And we're already running down on time. I have one more question for you, if
Sure.
you don't mind answering one more. If you could tell the public one thing, just one, about forestry and the forest products industry's impact on the environment, what would you say?
I had something till you threw that last piece in, but I think I could still do it. So
Do it. Go for it.
cutting trees is not bad. Okay? It's a tool in the toolbox. It is weeding the garden. And when you do that, you're allowing the remaining trees to be healthier, to provide more whatever product it is, whether it's just the scenic beauty, whether it's acorns, whether it's wood products, you'll have more of those things.
That's all for today's episode. Thank you to our guest, Hank Stelzer, and thank you to our sponsor, Choose Wood. Finally, thank you all for listening, and choose wood.